Good afternoon. Hello, everybody, and welcome into Senior Living Live. My name is Melissa. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Well, we are discussing ways to navigate living with a dementia diagnosis. There is no one size fits all for how this will look for each individual person. But our hope today is to arm you with knowledge and information that can help you or a loved one live well with dementia. That is the title of the webinar, as well as give you some ideas of how you can stimulate and maintain cognitive health now and in the future. Melora Jackson, you see her there. She is our guest today. She's the director of Second Wind Care, and she understands this topic so well. We are so fortunate to have her with us. She is available after her presentation to answer all of your questions, which I'm sure you'll have many. You can do that. Just scroll down to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A. Feel free to type out your questions there at any point in time during the presentation, and I will be happy to read those to Melora at the end of the webinar, which we expect to last about an hour. We may go just over a little over an hour here today based on our topic. Our dementia webinars always seem to be so popular. Melora, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. The webinar is all yours.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Let me get my slides up for you all. There we go. All right. So as she said, I am Melora Jackson. I am the Director of Clinical Services at Second Wind Dreams, and we have a whole host of different programs that I will be telling you about throughout the presentation as I talk to you about dementia. But I did want to give you a little bit of background information real quickly about us. So Second Wind Dreams is an organization with an international reach, but we're mostly in the U.S., and our mission is to change the perception of aging. So in other words, to fight ageism. And so we do this in a few different ways. Our main way is through fulfilling dreams of elders who live in long-term care, whether it's assisted living, nursing homes, personal care homes, those kinds of things, who don't have any family or support systems beyond their care situation. And so we have dream member organizations across the country that help us to fulfill those dreams and work with their elders in their local community. So the point of that is to help people in the community to see that people have dreams at any age, and we are all viable, important human beings to our last breath. We need to all have our dreams and wishes known and cared for. So the other piece of the company is to provide dementia education and services of that kind. So that's where I come in, heading all those clinical pieces of the program to also help educate about dementia and what it's like to have dementia, and also how we can help people. And that's what I'm going to talk about mostly today. So the big important thing about dementia care is that we practice good empathic person-centered care. So the empathic person-centered care approach is about forming relationships with the people we're providing care for, assisting with their care, whether it's dementia or not, really, but we're going to focus on empathic person-centered dementia care today. So care should be considered an interpersonal thing. And we want to make sure that we're focused on people's sense of self and their dignity and so on in providing person-centered care. A lot of these things that I'm going to say today, probably things that you know or practice already, but hopefully there'll be some tidbits in here that are things that are new to you as well. So when we talk about empathic person-centered care, it allows us to meet the needs of people with their own personhood in mind, who they are. Our care partners should spend time looking at the world from the perspective of that person they are assisting with care. And that is one of the big things that we do at Second Wind Dreams. Is one of our biggest programs is called the Virtual Dementia Tour. And I'm going to explain more about that in a little bit, but it's focused on getting a view of their world so we can do a better job of providing care. Empathic person-centered care is also the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing. within that person's frame of reference, which is again part of building that empathy for people living with dementia. And excuse me, and it gives the person the feeling of being understood easily, and to work on providing good communication, because we can't rely on that person to be able to communicate. It's no longer the person with dementia's responsibility for successful communication. It's on us. And so it's important that we learn how to communicate well and make things easier for people living with dementia. So what does it look like? When you're an empathic, person-centered care partner, you need to be fully present with the person. If you're distracted, if you're thinking about other things and not paying attention to cues and things, that can make it very difficult very quickly. So being fully present with that person. And it also makes the work of providing care and assistance easier if you're fully present, because then you're focused on what you're doing, why you're there, and your motivation for helping that person. It's important to be an active listener, making sure that you're reading as many cues as possible. So understanding what they're trying to communicate, even when their words fail. So be very tuned into that nonverbal communication. Being attentive to the environment and how it impacts the person. A lot of times we're doing a lot of things right with our own behavior and communication, but there's stumbling blocks in the environment that make it difficult to care for the person. So assessing all those kinds of things. And then staying calm, which sometimes is difficult, especially for family care partners, but being calm and not getting rattled by a situation and not causing uproar ourselves. And then reinforcing things that are going well, and providing reassurance and so on. So those are some of the main aspects of being an empathic person-centered care partner. Now, there's a lot of intangibles that come with it. Things that we know empathic person-centered care when we see it. We all know it. We can feel it. But how do we identify it? That's where the challenge comes in. So we know it's about relationship building. We know we want to acknowledge preferences. We want to look in the context of that individual's personal beliefs, and making sure that we're honoring that and not imposing our own. We want to focus on helping to maintain any remaining abilities at whatever stage of dementia a person is living with. We want to look at person's life experience and acknowledge that. We want to preserve dignity, of course, at all times. And then again, and you're going to see these themes repeating, striving to see the world through their eyes, and being accepting of that experience and not fighting that experience, and do things with them instead of for them. And that is a key piece, I think, making sure that we're with the person and how we do things rather than doing things for them, because we can create excess disability real quick if we're not, if we're doing things for a person that they're able to do. So the goal, of course, is to reduce those challenges that a person with dementia presents as they struggle with their challenges. So those behavioral expressions that tell us that there's needs not being met, or there's obstacles for them. And in turn, reducing any use of medications to control behavior. That should always be a last resort. And also to reduce our own frustration in our care experience as we help the person living with dementia. So there's four important things that I think we need to all remember as we are caring for or communicating with a person who is living with dementia. And the first one is, and you probably heard this many, many times, that the person with dementia is not giving you a hard time, but they're having a hard time. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of dementia training will communicate to people, but I think that's where some of our programs begin to help people understand that. So when you walk in the shoes of somebody who's living with dementia and you begin to see the challenging world that they live in, then you can begin to understand just how difficult it is. And so that's where our virtual dementia tour comes in, but also some of our other programs, like we have a guided imagery series of trainings as well that can be used to put yourself in the shoes of someone with dementia to get a feel for what those challenges might be. So there's several other good dementia trainings out there that will also help with this experience of seeing just how difficult it is. The second thing is that the person with dementia can't do anything wrong. When you can no longer um, do things in a sequence because of your uh, disease, then you cannot deliberately decide to do something. Now, that doesn't mean that behaviors sometimes that we see are not responding or challenging or difficult, and they can seem very painful, especially to the person who to for whom it's a loved one. But we need to remember that as the brain is damaged by the whatever type of dementia they have, they are not able to understand consequences anymore. They cannot think, if I do this, then that will happen. And when you can't do that, you can't make deliberate decisions about how to behave. You respond to things a lot more and react to things a lot more, but you're not necessarily able to do things with deliberate intention. So when I talk about somebody with dementia not being able to do wrong, I'm talking about people who are a little bit further advanced in their dementia. If somebody has just been diagnosed and is having some problems with forgetfulness or things like that, but is still quite self-aware, this doesn't always apply quite as much. But by the time a person gets well into their dementia, then this is definitely an important rule of thumb to remember. They cannot help it. Now, that is not to say that they won't do things that are difficult. For a family care partner, they may push those buttons that they've always pushed that trigger anger and frustration with that care partner. But now it's muscle memory. It's the way that they know how to react. It doesn't necessarily have that intention behind it. So if we look at it that way, and remember that the person can do no wrong, then it gets a little bit easier to handle some of those challenges when they come up. The third thing is that people with dementia, we have found, we know they behave in certain ways. We all know that. We know that people wander, they'll shadow other people, they may get resistant, they may talk to themselves or make funny sounds, they may do all kinds of things. But we see that people with healthy brains, when they go through the virtual dementia tour, behave in exactly the same ways. And the longer they're in there, the more dementia-like, if you will, their behaviors become. So are those behaviors really dementia behaviors, as we say, or are they not behaviors that any human being exhibits under the duress of dementia conditions? So they're not really difficult behaviors or challenging behaviors. They're just normal human behaviors in response to those conditions in the brain and the environment. Um, to give you an example, in the virtual dementia tour, people usually wander, they usually rummage. Many people talk to themselves or make just some really bizarre sounds, but they don't realize they're doing it because they've got loud noise in their ears and they can't hear it, but it feels good in their throat and it is a self-soothing kind of behavior. So when you see somebody with dementia who's making strange sounds, then we know to let it go because we need to let them make that noise because that's actually helped keeping them focused and grounded and it's soothing for them. A more extreme example, we see a lot of strange behaviors in the virtual dementia tour that mimic the world for people living with dementia. So a few years ago, I did a tour for the staff of an Alzheimer's research institute. And the director, a brilliant Alzheimer's researcher, so he knows all kinds of things about the brain and all kinds of things about dementia. And he went through it. And at the time, we have different tasks that we ask people to do. And I'll give you a few little bits and pieces, but don't want to give you spoilers of the whole thing. But one of the tasks that he was told to do while he was in the room having the experience was to match up 6 pairs of socks. and he looked for socks he thought matched. Now, normally people would take those socks and put them together and set them down or tie them in a knot or something like that to pair them up. But his interpretation was to put the socks on. So he found a pair he thought matched, which didn't always match, but that's okay. And he put one on each foot over his shoes. So there, it's already getting strange. Well, then he finds another pair and then he adds those. And pretty soon he's got a big wad of socks on each foot. And so I come to get him out of the room and I take the glasses and the headset off and I point at his feet and I say, "Tell me about this." And he was so excited that he thought he got all his tasks right, which he didn't get anything right, but that's okay. And I pointed at his shoes and said, "Tell me about this." And he looked at his feet and he said, "Oh my gosh, what happened to me?" And I said, "Well, you had dementia for a few minutes. So there you are." And so it was very humbling for him. He said, "I thought I knew everything about dementia. Now I don't feel like I know anything." Well, so, the conversation then went on to, well, you know so much, so very much about dementia, but now you know what it's like for the person who's living with it and what their experience is, which is very different than knowing about dementia. So that was a very humbling experience for him, but it opened the door to a whole new side of dementia care that's very important. Now, not every behavior, of course, is that extreme that we see. Most people who go through the tour won't do things quite that extreme, but some do some pretty odd things. So again, the point is that people with dementia's behavior isn't really abnormal or strange behavior. It's normal behavior that we would all exhibit under those circumstances. So the fourth thing that I think is really key to good empathic dementia care is that we are responsible for all the communication with people who live with dementia. They are no longer responsible at all. So for the person to the person who has dementia, we are all the same. We may have different roles and responsibilities in an environment caring for them. We might be with the environmental services staff. We might be the head of nursing. We might be the director, the social worker. We might be a direct care worker. You name it. It doesn't matter to the person with dementia. And if you work in senior living, that they will ask anybody or approach anybody with their whatever it is they're trying to communicate. We're all the same. Yes, we have different roles and responsibilities, but we all need to be kind of a united front in the way we communicate with people with dementia. So we all need to be consistent. We all need some basic understanding of what is happening with people with dementia and what their needs are. We don't all have to be experts, but we all need some base knowledge so that we can respond the same way. One great example that just came up yesterday, there's a assisted living chain along the East Coast that has a very active training program, and they did a little testimonial bit that you can actually go to our website or our social media rather pages and see. And it was the director of housekeeping services that had gone through the tour and had some good things to say about not only about the tour, but about the kinds of realizations and the things that people need to do when they're talking or interacting with someone with dementia. So it just kind of underscored that point that it's so important for everyone on the team to have some knowledge and base. So when we do VDT, that's short for virtual dementia tour, in a hospital setting, one of the groups that I always make sure I point out and then make sure are included are any of the cleaning staff, because they're the ones that are pretty much invisible in that environment, especially to the rest of the staff, but not to the patients, not to any of the patients in the hospital. So they will often see more things going on than the other staff, than the nursing staff or other care staff, because people, even with dementia, will try to mask some things and try to appear more capable or okay than they are. And they don't try to hide that in front of cleaning staff typically. So we need to pay attention to when they come out and tell us something's happening. They know better. So it's very important that they're included in not only in the conversations as needed, but they're included in all the training. So let's talk a little more about communication. So how do we communicate? Well, we communicate with body language, we communicate with tone of voice, we communicate with facial expressions. So when we talk about body language, people with dementia will know if we are um, upset or impatient or frustrated or whatever we're feeling. They're going to know. They're going to pick up on our body language, even if they don't understand a word we're saying. So making sure with our body language that it's open, that it's caring, that we are touch the person in appropriate caring ways, that we interact with people, that we model things, we cue with our gestures. So if I want someone to come with me, if I say, come with me, and I just stand there, they're going to just stare at me. But if I say, come with me, and I put my arm out, they'll take my arm, just reflexively. If I want someone to sit down who keeps getting up during the meal in the dining room, I might just introduce myself and say, have a seat. And people want to be polite, so they'll sit right back down. So things like that, using that body language to communicate is so important. And then in terms of tone of voice, we all know when somebody is being sarcastic. We know, well, not all of us know, but a lot of people know. And we can pick up on frustration and anger that way too, as well as with body language. And same with facial expressions. So making sure eye contact is good and that we're smiling is very, very important. We also want to assess the environment to make sure that there's not things interfering with our ability to communicate with them and for them to be able to understand us. So if there's loud noise going on around us, if the lights are too dim and we're expecting people to be able to pick up on visual cues that they can't pick up on because they can't see clearly. So if we, for example, come into a room and there's a bright window and we stand in front of the window and we're talking to the person, we might be making good eye contact, but all they see is a silhouette and they can't see us gesturing because we've got such bright light behind us. So being mindful of those kinds of things is really important. One of our other programs that we offer at Second Wind Dreams is a program called Dementia Interpreters, and that is designed to help us understand those communication challenges. So it's not a simulation of dementia. It does have some equipment that we put on some of the people and do exercises in the course of the training to help illustrate how do you communicate and how do you understand people when the person can no longer speak? What happens when the person can no longer move? How do we understand communications from a person with dementia if they're basically immobile, or maybe they can't even move their eyes? How do we interpret their communications with us, and how do we adjust our communications with them? This is a program that can be done online. We send equipment out to groups to do it, so the group would be there together, and then we can deliver the training long distance. So that's a nice advantage that's a little different from some of our other programs. So the other thing is to make sure that we're being, well, it's not reflected on the slide here, is to make sure that we're talking slow enough. That doesn't mean we have to talk slow like this. It means that we need to say one sentence at a normal speed, not too fast, but give it time to sink in. It takes the brain of somebody with dementia up to 20 seconds to process one sentence. So we want to make sure we're allowing enough time for people to absorb information and respond. So if we talk at the rate I'm talking constantly, a person with dementia they would have checked out a long time ago because they wouldn't have been able to follow what I'm saying because it's just one sentence after another. We need to do one thing at a time and then the next thing. And then let's talk about behavior a little bit. How do we behave? I'm not going to talk about how people with dementia behave. We know that. How do we behave, and what do we trigger or not trigger? How do we support people so that they can live well with dementia? So, for example, are we using Caring touch versus clinical touch, or no touch. A lot of times people will touch people on the arm with a caring, loving gesture to get attention, to help person focus, to acknowledge them and whatever they're communicating to us. And other people will take great care not to touch the person at all, or to only touch them as necessary in a more task-oriented way. And we don't want to do that. We want to have caring touch. So, and again, being, of course, mindful about that particular individual and any preferences they have. Some people don't like to be touched, and that's okay. But knowing that individual is very important. Acknowledging versus ignoring the person. So what do I mean by that? Excuse me. We often, when you have somebody with dementia who asks the same question or says the same thing over and over and over constantly, it's real frustrating for that care partner, especially if it's a family member. Now, that's not to say that sometimes people with dementia will repeat things or ask the same question because it's sort of a muscle memory comforting behavior. But again, it's about knowing that individual. But if somebody is asking you for something or asking you about something because they don't remember the answer, then we need to acknowledge it every single time. That does not mean we have to stop and explain things over and over. It may be as simple as pointing to a clock or a schedule, or to an object they're asking about. If it's a nurse passing meds or something like that, and there's a person with dementia who keeps asking the same question over and over, they may not have time to stop and do a lot. But you can acknowledge them as simply as nodding at them and saying, "Oh, 1 sec." Just making that gesture, 1 sec, something, anything, as minute as it may be, to acknowledge that they have a legitimate question, they are a person, and they need to be paid attention to, rather than ignoring them completely because you've heard it and you know they're going to be asking again in a second. If you go through the virtual dementia tour, you would find you might be asking or indicating that you need help because you didn't get all the instructions. And here's a spoiler. We tell the tour guides, as we call them, or helpers, the person in the room observing, is not to respond. And that can be very frustrating for people when they realize they're not even being acknowledged. And they begin to feel like, what am I, chopped liver? Well, that's the experience the person with dementia has over and over again. So making sure that we acknowledge things, however small that acknowledgement can be, is fine. It's got to be something, though. Another thing is inviting versus telling a person to do something. And I think every one of us is guilty of that at times, especially when we're in a hurry. We tend to give orders. Now, we may do it in a nice way, but we still need to invite the person. That doesn't mean we always have to ask, but we may do it with our body language. It's like I said, come with me. We're still saying something, telling, but we're inviting. We're not telling them. We're not ordering them to. Okay? They still have choice. And that is a key piece. I had an example about that. So there was a little lady I was privileged to know early on in my career. Her name was Anna. And Anna was this little German woman who had, after World War II, had moved to America with her family. And so she had learned English. But as her dementia progressed, she lost her English ability and reverted back to German. Well, this was in a nursing home, and I was helping with activities and social services and sort of whatever. I was just kind of that extra person there. And the nurse was trying to get her to take some cough medicine because she had an infection and was coughing constantly. So the nurse kept trying to hand her and tell her to take the cough medicine. And granted, this is the early 90s when we didn't really know what we were doing very well. And she kept trying to give it to her, and trying to give it to her, and trying to give it to her. And every time Anna would holler something that we assumed was cussing in German, not sure, slap it away or throw it across the room or something like that, because Anna didn't feel good. Anna was sick, so she didn't feel good. She didn't understand what was being asked of her, because she wasn't being asked, she was being told to take this medicine. So I intervened and said, come with me to the nurse. And I said, come, let's go into Anna's room with her. So we went into Anna's room. Well, Anna's Catholic, and there was a crucifix up there on the wall. And so I said, just follow my lead. Have your medicine ready. And so I just came in there, got down on my knees in front of that crucifix. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I know enough to work with what I've got, right? And so I know Anna is devout Catholic. So I start to say the Lord's Prayer. Now, I'm saying it in English, and while she's lost her English, those things that are wrote, like music, songs, prayers, and things that she says every day, come out in English still. So that's good muscle memory. So she gets down on her knees and she starts saying the Lord's Prayer too. So we get to the end. Amen. Cough medicine. Boom. Anna takes communion. Anna took communion twice a day for the next 2 weeks until she was better. So not only did we get the medicine in her, we did it in a way that worked for her in her world, in her experience, not forcing our way on her. And she had a meaningful moment, and it was a spiritual moment for her. So it was a win-win. So sometimes adjusting our behavior means being creative, working with their experience instead of forcing our way of doing things on them. So that's what I guess the lesson there is, to think outside the box, provide some choices, and make it a natural part of the day rather than making it something they have to do. So inviting versus telling them to do it, working with their experience instead of forcing our way. So you might see the graphic here on this slide says, imagine if behavior charts on staff, we did behavior charts on staff instead of on the people with dementia, which I kind of think we should. Now, I'm not going to mandate that, so don't worry. But I think the point here is that we need to rethink whose behavior do we need to change. We cannot change the person with dementia's experience and behavior, but we can adjust our own. We have control over that. We need to be the responsible party. So we do have a tool actually called DACE, which stands for Dementia Aware Competency Evaluation, which is a measure that can be done. It's an observation tool that uses Likert scales to measure person-centered care behaviors of the person giving care, not the person with dementia. So it's designed to be done in a care environment, and there's different care tasks that we would observe a person doing. And then after doing that, we would look at doing some kind of dementia training intervention, whether it's one of our tools like the VDT or something else entirely, it doesn't matter. And then after a couple of weeks, after that training, doing it again to see if there's any changes in those scores, if the person is doing more empathic person-centered care. So it's looking at those care behaviors, caring touch versus clinical, eye contact. Do we interact with the person, or do we just do the task as if the person was the task? Are we offering choices? Are we reinforcing and reassuring, and so on and so forth? So it's important that we have the same observer before and the second time after, and that have the care worker doing the same tasks with the same resident, so that we can get as many variables controlled as possible. And that can be used in a number of different ways as well, to identify training interventions that are needed, to identify strengths, to identify, you can compare shift to shift, you can compare an individual to themselves, and it can help you figure out some things that may be going on in the environment that are problems as well. So there's lots of ways to use that tool, but it's our behavior that needs to change. So here's 5 R's that we can use to support people who are living with dementia, to make sure that we are helping them to have their best experience and best quality of life. So the first one is to reinforce. So we want to reinforce things that are working well, reinforce the person, reinforce things that they are able to do. And that includes praise. We want to make sure that we're praising the person on a regular basis, because, you can praise people who have healthy brains one time. Good job. You did a great job with that. And then that's the end of it because they heard the compliment. But the person with dementia, we need to keep repeating it because they are going to forget. So they need more constant reassurance. This can be also soothing words, caring touch, all those kinds of things to reinforce people. Reassurance, of course, very important. We all know that. We all need help when we're having a tough time. And reassurance needs to be a fairly constant thing for people living with dementia. We need to rescue people when they're struggling. We want to give people a chance, if they're telling us something and they can't find the word, give them a second, because again, their brains are having difficulty with that. They may have aphasia when the wrong word comes out, or they can't find the word, or they forget what they're saying. So give them a second. And then when if they can't produce it, then offer a word as a question. If they say, I need to get let it sit there. It may be uncomfortable for us. Let it sit there for a second. And then if they don't, maybe they're pointing to there's a cup. I need the cup. So you'd ask like that. We also want to rescue them in social situations if they're having a difficult time, or rescue them from triggers that are causing agitation or frustration for them. If we see that, let's rescue them, help them out with that. Redirect. We all know about redirection. If there's something that's challenging, or if they're remembering, or they think they have to pick their kids up after school, rather than telling them their kids are grown, redirecting that conversation somewhere else. And then reassessing things, reassessing constantly the environment, reassessing the communication and how we're behaving towards them, all those kinds of things. That constant reassessment, sort of recalibrating constantly how we are supporting that person, is so important, especially if things are becoming difficult. So if things are too loud, if it's too hot or cold in the room, if it's too dark, if it's too bright, if it's too busy, too much clutter, all those kinds of things we need to be constantly paying attention to and tweaking as we go along, because it can be very difficult. Now, one of the tools that I will often use when I'm trying to manage a challenge like that and assess things, if it's not incredibly obvious, which most of the time it will be, but if it isn't, I do this little checklist, and this little acronym called PEP, P-E-P. So first I look to a physical issue if there's a problem. Are they too hot? Are they too cold? Are they hungry? Do they need to go to the bathroom? All those kinds of things. So I look at those physical causes for a behavior change. If there's nothing there, then I look to the environment. Is it too bright or dark? Is it too loud? Is it too busy? Did somebody, Lord forbid, move that furniture around? Look at all those kind of environmental things. And then if neither of those, I can't come up with anything in those two columns or those two words, then I look to a psychological cause. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we're jumping to a psychoactive medication or anything like that. It may mean, when I say psychological, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be grief, it could be frustration or something else that isn't apparent in those other two. So looking at those kinds of things. And usually if you kind of go through a formula like that, and you can come up with your own system if you have one that's better that works for you, but assessing for all those things, then we can usually figure out what is triggering that challenge or that behavior or that communication difficulty or whatever it is that's not quite right, and find that solution. So then some other general recommendations whenever you're around somebody with dementia, whether you're providing direct care or not. Again, we're all on the same team, no matter what our roles are. So you want to find ways to give control back to that person. So if we can let them do as many things as they can for themselves, and give them opportunities for success, that's great. We also want to make things familiar and easy to do. If we're using language that is slang, that is more modern terms, the other day, it was probably 15 years ago, I was in a assisted living, and the activity person was saying something like, I'm just going to pop this CD in here so we can listen to some music. And there was blank stares, and people were trying to figure out, you could see their brains working, trying to figure out what is a CD and how would you pop it. That makes no sense. But to say, I'm going to play some music or put on a record, even if it's a CD, terms that people understand are so important. Okay. So making sure things are familiar, both with our language, but also in the environment as well. And of course, giving good concrete choices. If we just say open-ended questions like, what shirt would you like to wear? That's obviously too much, but would you like to wear the green shirt or the red shirt today? And giving them a choice. Even if the person can't communicate or indicate which one, still we want to offer those choices to affirm their personhood. And then if they are not able to respond to us, then say, it feels like a green shirt day. Let's do that today. So you've offered a choice, affirmed their personhood, and then done what you needed to do to get that person dressed. We also want to create calm and safety, always calm and safety, because it's a scary world for the person with dementia. Even when we're giving great care, things can be scary because things can be misinterpreted visually, things can be misinterpreted with what they hear, and so on. Even our sense of touch, which we often take for granted. So making sure that we make the person feel safe and create a calm, soothing environment as much as we possibly can. Of course, we already talked about reassurance and encouragement. That's so important. Doing that on not only a regular basis, but a frequent basis. Giving people things to do that are meaningful. We're not all activity staff, but we are all people who have interactions with folks. So it doesn't matter what we're talking about, giving people meaningful things to do. And it can be simple things like handing somebody a washcloth where you're helping them to clean up so that they might start washing automatically. So it can be something as simple as an activity of daily living, or it could be something more involved. I remember not too long ago seeing a maintenance man working on an AC unit, and there was a person with Down syndrome who also had dementia, and he would follow that maintenance guy everywhere. And at first the maintenance guy was got real annoyed with it because he's like, I got to do this job, and he's just right here all the time talking at me. And he didn't want to be rude, but he didn't know how to manage that. Well, after he went through the virtual dementia tour and debriefed about it and realized where that person was coming from, and that that person's father was a mechanic and he used to hang out with his father when he was younger. And so the maintenance man just started bringing an extra wrench, small wrench. And so while he was working on things and that gentleman was there, he would just hand him a wrench and say, can you look at the wrench for me? Or can you be ready to assist me and hand it to me when I need it, or something like that. And then he expanded to a few other tools and let him kind of participate in ways that were benign and safe. And it gave the gentleman some purpose as well. Taking cues from the people with dementia. Again, people with dementia are communicating with us constantly. We just need to learn to read their cues. So that's very important, and that we're constantly adjusting to them. And then adjusting our time expectations, because their sense of time is going to be rather fluid and sometimes is not the same as ours. So people with dementia may ask you when lunch is when they've just eaten, but the sun hasn't moved in the sky enough yet to give them a different environmental cues. And if they don't recognize that feeling of fullness that they're experiencing, they may keep asking for lunch. So their time sense is skewed. Our time sense can get skewed. And we often will expect people to move as quickly as we think we could. And that's not very fair. So slowing it down and adjusting our time expectations is particularly when we're asking someone to do a task. So when people say, I don't have time, I've got so many people to take care of. I will often use an example of, now, remember, I'm not comparing people with dementia to children. They are not children by any stretch, but there are similar challenges in some ways. So I'll say, for example, if someone's trying to get somebody ready to get dressed to go to breakfast or something, and they say, I'm in such a rush, then they're in a hurry to get that person dressed. And then there's challenges to that. And the person becomes frustrated, agitated, and starts to get resistive or aggressive or whatever. I ask them, have you ever tried to rush a toddler to get dressed quickly? How well did that work for you? When they think about it, they think, oh gosh, no, that wouldn't work. Well, why are you expecting this of somebody who's living with dementia? They're not able to do that. You're giving them information too fast. You need to slow it down. For every 30 seconds of patience you have at the front end of the task is going to save you 5 minutes at the back end. So you're going to make things much easier for yourself. So adjusting those time expectations is pretty important. A few more things real quick, and I know our time is getting short. Supporting people's abilities in different ways is so important. So activities that are meaningful, as I said, but also that may help build a skill or maintain a skill that they have. So finding, knowing their hobbies, their crafts, their interests, things they used to do before they got dementia, and maybe modifying those things so that they're able to do them with success. So maybe simplifying them in different ways. And I mentioned earlier, finding ways to avoid excess disability. So if we start doing things for them because we get impatient and it's quicker if I just do it myself, well, then they're going to lose those abilities. So making sure that in order for that person to live well with dementia, we need to help them to maintain what they can and do what they can for themselves. And then uses of assistive technology, of course, things that can help serve as reminders or, big clocks, the clocks that tell the date and the time, and, phones with giant pictures, all those kinds of things we all know about. But one thing I do want to caution you with is I've seen people, particularly people who are living at home, but if they have apartments or whatever, sometimes families use smart technology that is not so smart for that person. So for example, if you use maybe, I'm going to use Google, I can't say out loud because mine will go off here, but the one from Amazon, or the phone, the Siri or something like that, or whatever. They may not know where that disembodied voice is coming from. It can be incredibly confusing and difficult. So we want to make sure that the use of assistive technology is appropriate to what that person is able to understand, because if it's not, it can do more harm than good. So being mindful of that. Social connections we know are so important. We must maintain social connections, and in keeping people interacting, people are naturally tend to withdraw more when they have dementia. So finding ways to engage them, but also if a person wants to be left alone, honoring that and not forcing people into group environments or activities. Sometimes one-on-one social connections are better for some people, and that's perfectly fine. But we know from research over many, many years that, isolation, we all know, is difficult. We all know after COVID just how hard isolation is on everyone, especially those living with dementia. There is an ongoing study that's been going on since the 80s it used to be called the nun studies. Now it's the religious order studies. And one of the things that they look at is social perception of social support. And a lot of the people who participate, and these are all people in religious orders who basically have, that's as close as a human we can get to a control group, because they all get up together, they eat the same things, they do the same activities, and so on and so forth. And when a lot of these individuals who did not have dementia passed away, they do autopsies on brain tissue, and they find plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's in the brain, but they never got Alzheimer's. And those typically were the people who felt like they had a lot of social support. Those who didn't feel like they had social support, who felt lonely, even in group activities and things, often did develop Alzheimer's disease. So we know that's an important factor. So keeping those social connections, even if a person already has dementia, will help slow down that disease process and help them to function better. And of course, we know all the other kinds of things like nutrition, sleep hygiene, exercise. making sure the person is warm enough or cool enough, all those kinds of physical needs being taken care of to help that person live as healthy as possible is important. And then helping them to find ways to reduce stress. In early stages, it's easier for a person to be able to practice stress reduction techniques themselves. But as they begin to progress, we want to do activities and things with them to help them to relax. So even if it's something like a hand massage with some lotion, or listening to some soothing music or some sensory stim kinds of things, those things can help reduce stress and make it easier for the person with dementia. And then, of course, appropriate safety measures. I don't really need to tell you about that, but those things are all so key to a person being able to maintain their abilities and quality of life. So I've talked at length about some of our programs, but I want to just kind of review some of our other ones for you real quickly. So the DREAMS program, which I talked about at the beginning, helps with fighting ageism and helping that person fulfill a dream, which can be very meaningful. We have different categories, which I don't have time to get into now, but if you ever want to see some of the dreams, they're really neat stuff. Or maybe your organization is a dream member, so you know about it. But if you don't, I encourage you to go to YouTube and look at our Second Wind Dreams YouTube channel. You'll see videos of all kinds of dreams being fulfilled. It's just really neat stuff. In association with that, we have gifts of light and cards of light, which are much as the names say, getting cards for different occasions to people who are living in long-term care, and gifts at the holidays. Then the virtual dementia tour, as I said, is a simulation of what it's like to have dementia, with the goal of creating empathy and helping us to learn better how we can change our behavior. DACE is that measure, again, that dementia aware competency evaluation. Dementia interpreters is a communication exercise program, and the pictures you'll see here on the slide, the one in the middle is the virtual dementia tour, person being garbed up with some of that gear. The dementia interpreters, they're holding up actually a straitjacket, which our partners in the UK who develop it, one of the people are in groups of threes, and one of them wears a straitjacket. We in the US aren't so keen to have that kind of control taken away from us. So we just put them on loosely. We don't tie it on the back. And then we just ask the person to sit on their hands. So please don't let that scare you away. But it has the same effect, but that's what they're holding up. So there. And then one of the other programs we have, which is we have just recently launched, is new, very exciting to be doing this. Not age-based like our other programs, but autism reality experience. And it's a simulation of what it's like to deal with sensory challenges that people with autism have. So it has things to address both hypoactive and hypersensitive kinds of things that happen to the senses when a person has autism. And so that's what that other picture is. So it does involve a physical simulation and watching a film and doing some activities. It's a bit different in design and a little more structured educational piece than the other ones that are more a little more discussion oriented, but it's a very good tool. And I think particularly useful for those of us who are caring for elders who are on the autism spectrum, which they may or may not have dementia, but there are some particular needs that they may have as well. And then we also have our guided imagery program, which was born out of COVID when we couldn't do the virtual dementia tour. We couldn't do in-person simulations, but we could take people through an experience to help put them in their mind in the shoes of somebody with dementia. So we have lots of different topic areas for that. Everything from elopement from the home to what it's like to be moved into long-term care or assisted living of some kind. And then we have various other educational programs and webinars and things like that that we do as well. So we try to have a battery of different offerings to meet different needs. And if any of those are of interest to you, you certainly can get in touch with us. And I will show you my contact information in just a moment here at the end. This is one last slide. I'm going to just let you read it. Well, I'll read it actually for those of you who might have difficulty reading with this or vision issues. But this came out of our grant programs in the nursing homes that we were doing. We came up with this pledge that we think is real important for any care partner to consider when caring for somebody with dementia. So it says, I pledge to seek out a deep understanding of the person with dementia, to build a relationship no matter the depth of the disease, to provide individualized care, comfort and care. I pledge to anticipate their needs, to decrease their stress, and view each need from their perspective, not mine. To be their advocate and passionately refuse to accept poor care from anyone. I pledge to smile first, hug first, welcome first, always remembering where they dwell, to engage with my eyes, my touch, and my tone of voice, to provide supportive attention based on the promise that I am reaching them at a deeper level than cognition. I pledge to be aware of how they forgive me when I'm not all in and still look for me every day. So if you're interested in having a copy of this, you can certainly let me know, and I would be happy to send it to you. If you're not already one of our program users, if you are, then you would find it in our member portal. This is my contact information. I seem to have talked the whole hour, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have and be available in the future as well.
Well, it was an hour well spent. Let's just put it that way. And we're still going to get some questions in.
Mhm.
So, guys,
Absolutely.
these webinars, in particular, are dementia-based webinars. We know you have questions, and hopefully today you had many of them answered with this presentation that was very well put together by Melora. Melora, a couple of things that we have had come in. Somebody wanted to know, and you've already answered it, if they could get the slides available. And so, as she said, yes, not a lot of our speakers, some of them say that they'll do that, and some of them prefer to keep that to themselves. So Melora has offered to do that, and I will tell everybody that yes, this webinar will be available to all of you in the email you use to RSVP for this webinar starting tomorrow. And in that email with the link, which you can share with family and friends or just rewatch yourself, we will also add the slides from this presentation. And I love that our audience is very educational based. They want those slides, and I don't blame them. So those are the questions we've had in so far, was wanting those particular questions answered. So I hope that that helps Laura and Julie to let you know what you wanted to know. If anybody else has a question for Melora, this is a really good time to get them in. While we wait for those and give somebody time to type that question out, Laura, I do have a question. That virtual tour, the Dementia virtual tour, I've been through one with the Arbor Company, and it is so eye-opening. And I wish that every single person watching this, whether it's live or on the back end, could themselves go through that tour, because it is just things happen that you aren't even aware of, or you don't even think of. And then you go through it and you're just thinking, huh, I never thought about approaching this that way with somebody who has dementia. How can somebody be a part of that tour? And do you offer them throughout the country? How does that work?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So, yes, and I would totally agree with everything you said. It absolutely is eye-opening. And of course, I'm a little biased because I run the program, but even then, long before that, I found it very useful. So we have program users all over the country, and I think a few Arbor Company franchises actually have it, but we have many program users from different organizations and businesses all over the country that offer that to the community. So if you are in an area and you don't know of anyone who does it, you can get in touch with us and we will connect you with a group that offers that. If you want to do it for staff training, we have certified trainers that are sort of master trainers that can come in and do it for your organization. And if you want to get the program yourself and get trained how to do it, or are interested in becoming a certified trainer, so that you can train your staff and train other people to facilitate and conduct the tour, we have all kinds of different options. So if you just get in touch with us you can use this contact information and reach out to us, and we will either find someone to help do it for you, or we can help you to get the program and get trained so that you can use it yourself. And there are costs to that, except for the community version. Anybody and no participant ever pays, ever. So if you want to go through as a community member, go through a tour, you can do that certainly for free as well. So basically get in touch with us and we'll figure out what meets your needs best, and we will get that to you. We also do have different versions of it beyond the community version, and then the traditional one, which is what we use in staff training. We have a special version for hospitals. So if you know of a hospital that wants to take staff through, we would use that version. And then we have one for families that I think is very important too. That is a self-directed tool that a family can purchase, or we have trainers that can come in and work with a family in their home for a half day. And use that one as well. And then we have some other versions as well. So just get in touch with us and we'll hook you up with whatever it is that you need to meet that need and get you a chance to take the tour.
Yeah, it takes everything that you've said here today and really drives the point home by putting you in that situation, which is it's difficult to do, but kudos to all of you for finding a way to do that, to sort of put somebody in the shoes of somebody who is living with dementia. So thank you. We do have a question from Anonymous. Is it okay to lie to someone who has dementia to help them feel better, such as if they're asking for a spouse and the person has passed away?
Yeah, I'm so glad somebody asked that question, and I'm sorry I didn't even think to address it in my words earlier. Absolutely is the short answer. But let me give you a little background with that. First of all, that is not lying. It may seem like a lie from our perspective, but what you need to do is get it into the world of that person with dementia. In their world, that person is alive. You are going to give them the truth that they need to hear, not our truth, but their truth. And in that respect, I mean, we talk about therapeutic fibbing or whatever you want to call it, but it absolutely, absolutely it's not lying to them. It may feel like it to you, but it is not. It is truth for them. So it's true. So comfort, making a person feel reassured, and their quality of life is far more important than an ethical dilemma that we impose upon ourselves because of what we think is our truth when it is irrelevant. What matters is their mental and emotional well-being. And so there is no lying in a case like that.
Yeah, and it goes back to the building blocks of what you had mentioned here in this webinar. And Anonymous says, thank you. You
Mhm.
know, and you talk about the R's, reassurance,
Mhm.
right? And it may be something you have to repeat over and over and over again, and that's okay.
Mhm.
I just, when we have these discussions, I always tend to learn something new. And I know I certainly did today. And I hope that that has been the case for all of you watching, whether again, it's live or you're watching at midnight on the back end of this when we are not live. This has just been fantastic today. And Melora, our time is up, and it appears that the questions that our audience wanted to ask, they have asked them. So, which is for a dementia webinar, which is good. It means that you've answered everything within your presentation. So, and yes, Anonymous, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. I agree. I think we all agree. Thank you for taking the time and for having such a wonderful everything that you do, from the tours to being with us here today to share your knowledge about what it's like to live with dementia and try to live your best life with that diagnosis. And it's easier said than done. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.
Thank
Thank you.
you. And that is it for our questions today. We thank you all for being a part of the conversation. We have many videos and webinars just like this one on our website. We would like you to head on over to www.seniorlivinglive.com. All of our content there is all about senior living. It is on demand, and the best part, it is free. We thank you all so much for being here with us today on Senior Living Live. Have a great day, everybody.